This is How to AI UXR, an 8-part series that explores how AI is being used across the research workflow, and even how it's exploding it. In each episode, I'll talk with someone who's volunteered to show a thing, so screens on. If you haven't seen it yet, the series pairs with the How to AI UXR map, a 5-page map that will help you pinpoint your AI maturity level and offers practical, real-world applications you can adapt for your research systems. Find the link in the show notes. I'm Kate Towsey, and this series is brought to you by Strela, the AI-powered customer research platform. In this episode, I'm joined by Brooke Sykes, Senior Manager of User Research, and Allison Robbins, Staff User Researcher, both of them working on the Firefox team at Mozilla. They call it the messy middle, where leadership is pushing AI adoption, teams are trying to stay thoughtful, managers are learning how to create psychological safety, and everyone's navigating the trade-offs of speed versus accuracy, confidence versus competence, and what human in the loop actually even means. If you're learning to get comfortable with the unknown, experimentation, constant change, and innovation, you're about to learn some useful mental models to make this messy middle feel less messy. Hi, Allison, and hi, Brooke. This is very cool to have two people in the room. Usually I have like one guest, at least on this series. We have been talking in recent weeks, as we've been kind of connecting over this episode, about what you're calling the messy middle. Brooke, do you want to dive in and tell us what you mean about the messy middle? And the messy middle in terms of AI?
Yeah, happy to. So I can speak about the messy middle from the manager's perspective. So from my perspective, the messy middle is the squeeze between the leadership mandate to adopt AI on my team and wanting to make that real, but then also the needs from the ICs on my team and the needs for kind of clarity. What does that mean in practice? Adopt AI isn't a strategy, as well as legitimate concerns around, what does this mean for my workflows? Maybe even my workplace identity. There can be some anxieties around job security. And kind of all the while still also processing this change, this really big change for myself and what it means for my work. So some of the core challenges that have come up through that messy middle for me have been managing legitimate needs in two directions, wanting to be credible upwards and showing progress, but also wanting to maintain trust downwards and listening to ICs and helping them, learn new skills and build trust with this technology in a way that works for them. Another one is skill asymmetry. So some people on the team, AI has been great. One person told me it was a thought partner that the always on thought partner they always wish that they had. And they've really just thrived in this era of tinkering and figuring things out. And for other people, they might not have the same level of AI literacy. So managing that. And then I think the third one is really just around, as I mentioned, translating the mandate into meeting. So clear mandate, adopt AI quickly, but what does that mean for the team, for our workflows? What does that look like? What is success? So just really trying to figure it out, that translation work to make it tangible. And some of that translation work is also kind of invisible, which, is another challenge in itself.
Something that's come up quite a lot in conversations and recording this series has been this dichotomy between let's dive in and just make stuff in play, which has come across as being a really important part of how we grapple with AI and learn how to use it, versus let's step back and not make things wildly and be strategic about what we make. Is that some of the messy middle for you as well? Is that coming up in Mozilla?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is that tension. I want folks to have time to explore and get, space to play, explore, get used to the technology. But then I also want to provide some structure. And so, moving from that individual use of AI to more of a team or systems approach. What does that look like? What are the guardrails? What does good verification look like? Is that something we want to not necessarily standardize because it's really contextual, but have a shared understanding across the team? So I have been thinking a lot about what's the right amount of freedom to play and structure, or like what's the right time period, like, okay, everybody explore, and then now we're going to pick a few of those higher leverage areas or workflows and socialize those across the broader team.
So I know that later in the conversation, we're going to go to a question about or a discussion around psychological safety. And it feels like a natural segue here, but I'm going to kind of hang 10 on it. Allison, so you've got a graphic, a framework for thinking about the messy middle.
Yeah, so Kate, what I wanted to share is just a way that I've been thinking about how do we navigate conversations about AI and have effective dialogues with one another? Because one of the problems is that so many of these conversations are really polarized. And I don't know if other folks have felt this way, but I personally felt the need to like defend my position on AI. And I feel like so often we're pushed into like either side of the spectrum of you either are all in on AI or you're a Luddite that wants to walk into the forest. And so, what I'm going to share with you are what I have called four tensions that I've discovered in my personal experiences with AI. And tensions aren't contradictions, they are two things that need to hold at the same time. And so, how I've been talking about this with folks, on the one hand, when we talk about AI, one thing that is true is that AI can dramatically accelerate individual output. It lets us do more than was ever possible before. At the same time, our AI can create more work for the people around you, and people are treating this as an either or. It either helps you or you're drowning your coworkers in slop. In reality, it can do both. The same thing applies to AI can make us better at our jobs. It can give us the ability to skill up in areas that were maybe out of reach for us before, or hone different areas that would have taken a lot of time if we were doing on our own without a partner. Or it can trick us into thinking we're more capable than we are. Maybe what we're doing here isn't building those skills, and this is just superficial, not a depth and understanding, but like just a superficial understanding. Again, both of these things can be true. It can help you skill up, and we can sometimes mistake our ability to craft really effective prompts and get really great output out of AI is ourselves knowing more than we do and mistaking where to place that confidence. The other tension that I see is that AI can definitely act as a scaffold that helps you think. Other folks posit that it is going to rot your brain entirely, and that folks that are using AI are decreasing the amount of information they can recall, struggling to put together their own thoughts. In reality, it can do both. If you are using AI intentionally, you are not just outsourcing your thinking, you're bringing in at moments where it could augment your ability. And a lot of folks that I see using AI effectively do so in a really reflexive manner where they're aware of both their own limitations and the tools. And then finally, there's folks that say that AI, again, can help us produce work that is objectively of a really high quality. This is a part of the argument that I don't really hear talked about very often, is this idea of like a social penalty or stigma that happens when you use AI. I know, having talked to coworkers, that so many folks are spending times Command F looking for M dashes or any other telltale signs that somebody has used AI in their work. And there are a lot of people that enjoy a gotcha moment where they think that they're dunking on somebody because they can tell that they've used AI. Um, I think that it's both here, that like we really need to be aware of not having that having these witch hunts for our colleagues or our peers in the space that are using AI, it's not effective. And people, I think, unfortunately, need to figure out and work with folks like their managers, like Brooke, for like, how do you navigate this as an organization or as a team? Like, what happens when folks are going to resort to using AI in like a shadow capacity because they feel that unless they are very skilled at hiding the fact that they use this tool, that their colleagues are going to think of them as lazy or less capable. Yeah, this is just something I've personally found really helpful in being able to speak to both sides and making people feel seen on either side, that there's room for both of those perspectives to exist at the same time.
This is fascinating because it feels like there's a dichotomy. Brooke, we were speaking about earlier about management or executive from above is pushing, we must use AI. And then these feelings coming up from ICs, like you, Allison, in terms of how do we use AI? And I thought that the push to use AI was resulting in, if you're not using AI, then what are you doing? That's also come through. But then at the same time, if you are using AI, then there's a social penalty around that. So it feels like damned if you do and damned if you don't. Is that the case?
I think so, personally. I think that there is this simultaneous desire to use the technology, yet any evidence of using said technology is automatically associated with somebody being lazy or trying to cut corners. And so I think that that comes from both sides, right? Like you have typically like the top-down directive to use a tech, and then you and your peers are trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like? But then amongst each other, where everyone's looking around and being like, oh, I can tell that's AI generated. And so really then you have to figure out how to use AI, but kind of cosplay as this person that isn't using this technology at all. And it's just a lot of wasted energy and anxiety, honestly. Like, I think beyond it being a waste of time, I think that has like psychological implications too, because you're constantly thinking like, how is this coming across? How am I being perceived?
Brooke, I can see that this is right up your street. How are you managing that tension?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Allison explained because this is the perfect example of the messy middle we're in, and that we're in this transition stage where everyone is figuring out how to integrate AI into our workflows and, using AI, but then don't make it too obvious. And there's even research that has come out that people will judge an output differently if they hear that AI was used in creating it. They will judge it more poorly or give less credit to the person who created it because they used AI to create it, which is really fascinating. So a lot of things to navigate right now. I do think we'll probably hit a point in the future where we are not removing M dashes and trying to like hide the AI of AI within our writing. I think that also is probably applied to different things. Like there's something different about like, a message from a leader or, a thought piece than like using AI in your data analysis. Like there seems to be like different judgment for different uses. But I do think all of that is just indicative of this change, this place, this moment that we're in where things have changed fast and people are still processing that change. There's kind of like new social norms, right?
I was thinking actually this morning about, I've written a book, Research That Scales. It's about scaling, and I teach masterclasses around scaling. And I'm sort of realizing, wow, I'm sort of leaning on old archetypes of scaling, and they still work right now. But will they work in a year's time? Because AI is changing our archetypes around what it means to be good at your job, what it means to deliver quality, what it means to scale things, what it means to be in the world, which is just, it's a lot for us to deal with. Brooke, we're going to skip ahead a little. I wanted to, it feels like a perfect time to talk about psychological safety. And again, that dichotomy between playing and maybe wasting time making things that aren't useful versus having strategic intent. How are you as a manager balancing those, again, those extremes?
Yeah. It's a good question. It has been on my mind a lot of like balancing that, like, here's freedom to play and get used to this technology, figure out how it's going to fit into your workflow, which I think is really important, but then also providing some, principles or guidelines to help like ground people. So trying to find the right balance there. I don't think I've necessarily cracked the code, but it's like a little bit of both. And then in terms of psychological safety, um, it's a challenge and I'm kind of treating it as a team challenge. Like I don't have all the answers and I'm pretty honest about that. And I'm processing this change along with my team and I'm trying to cultivate we are in this together. I know you're all capable of, changing our workflows and integrating this change. I'm here to support you. It's okay to ask questions. Like Allison has been a huge resource on our team because she is very smart and loves to read about AI. And I have straight up asked her questions, months ago, what's an NCP exactly? And we're sharing articles with each other. We're all learning a lot of new stuff, especially if you're a non-technical practitioner, if you're not a software developer. So we're using Claude Code as non-technical folks. There's a lot of new acronyms, new jargon, new concepts to learn. So sharing articles, making it clear that like I don't have all the answers, I'm also learning, and then trying to create space, like I said, for asking questions, for having doubts, and even for changing your mind about things. Certain things we discussed on the team 6 months ago, some of us have changed our position now, or things that we were chatting about a year ago, our thoughts might have evolved.
When I was creating the How to AI UXR map, there were so many words I came across: IDE, MCP, model councils, and so I kept noting down these words. And on the last page of the map, there's a glossary, and some of those might, within the next 3 months, look like, why would you have a glossary about those terms? Because they've become so much a part of our vernacular. But yeah, there are just so many new terms, and I love that you are creating an environment where you can change your mind, you can be wrong, you can make something rubbish, you can make something amazing, and it might break a month later, because we're needing to be in this learning, making mindset right now to get to a place where we actually understand the technology and what it can offer us. Allison, something that I know you're thinking a lot about is human in the loop. And it strikes me that part of this messy middle is where, you've spoken about, it's not just about handing stuff, like surrendering to the AI is a term that's quite common these days. That's from Ethan Mollick from Wharton School of something. I should have these facts down, but people will know what I'm talking about. And there's all these, you've spoken about all these tensions and this pull. Have you found that, this is going to sound leading, but is it about the human in the loop that is, how do you balance those tensions technically?
Yeah. So, I mean, on either side of those tensions, it is not a foregone conclusion that one or the other things is going to happen. What dictates whether or not you're going to stand to benefit from the AI, or it's going to be to your detriment, it really comes down to how you use it and making sure that that use is intentional. One of the things that I have struggled with when looking for what does best practice look like in this space is like human in the loop or trust but verify. Like, all of these pieces of advice are given as just to be like self-evident. Well, if you keep a human in the loop, you'll be fine. But when I started asking questions around, but like, what does that mean? I struggled, because when I started picking around the edges of things, there didn't really feel like there's a ton of substance. And so I came across this really awesome article from the Harvard Business School that identified 3 ways of being human in the loop. Essentially, they took a bunch of consultants, they gave them a task, and they looked at how they approached it. And there were 3 main ways that that happened. The first way was, I think, what we commonly associate with being human in the loop, which is a self-automator. And so that is somebody that is taking the task and largely just handing it to the AI and having the outputs come back and more or less accepting them as is. And it's really important that that is not a bad way to be in the loop, assuming that the context that you're working in that's appropriate. Where I think that way of thinking about human in the loop becomes problematic is when we assume that that is the only way to be in the loop, to check the output, whatever that means. There's 2 other modalities that I think are really interesting and personally get me really excited for using AI. One of which is this centaur. So these are folks that are maybe holding on to the strategy or pieces that require a lot more judgment. So if you're crafting a narrative, if you're crafting a strategy, you're holding on to that structure and then passing that off to the AI and letting it work with kind of the directions or sandbox that you've given it. And then finally, the third mode is the cyborg mode. And that is where you are going back and forth in conversation and really using that as the thought partner that Brooke, you mentioned earlier. And these are not like BuzzFeed style personality types either. Like, ideally, you're going to be able to identify when it makes sense to move in between these modes. And there's always going to be probably one way that you're more comfortable working with than the others. But what effective human in the loop looks like and how you're able to navigate those tensions effectively is to be able to be aware of, okay, what is the context here? How much risk exists? Is this a skill that I know that this model is capable of performing well in, and making the decision there? And likely, if you're doing that within one single project, you're probably going to bounce and ping pong between a bunch of those ways of being in the loop, like pretty constantly.
To give you an example, Kate, it was about a year ago, I think, or sometime in the past, year or two. I did a workshop with the team where I mapped out the research process, and I said, what parts, AI tools are available. What part of the research process is tedious? It's like maybe lower risk? What part can we kind of offload to AI? And we were, thinking about our comfort level with the technology and where there could be some good opportunities for us. And I remember Allison saying, I don't know, I don't really think about it as like one specific task. Like, yes, there might be some obvious candidates like transcription. She's like, but actually, I'm using AI every day, all day for everything as a thought partner. I'm ping ponging back and forth with it. I'm asking it to poke holes in my work. I'm asking it to, show the biggest counter argument to the insights that I've crafted here. And really more of that. Would it be cyborg? Is that the cyborg model, Allison?
I
Or the
think so. A
centaur?
lot of times,
Cyborg.
yeah, I'm going back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, just like really working back and forth. I was like, oh yeah, it's not just like a discrete task. I mean, there can be that is one mode of working, but there's also these other modes of working where, you're in dialogue with it all the time.
I love frameworks, and I love this 3-part as a framework for just allowing people as they're designing the systems, but also just as they're using AI systems to be much more aware of, oh, I'm in cyborg mode, or oh, it's human automator mode. Is that correct?
Yeah, the self-automator for sure.
Self-automator, exactly. So you're in centaur, you're in self-automator, you're in cyborg, and to have that in your mind as to being aware as you move through your day that this is what you're actually doing and this is how you're working is really, really helpful. And then when you come to designing the broader systems as opposed to the I, me, mine AI systems, which Brooke, you might have mentioned off recording, but was an article I wrote, I think it was in February this year, to basically say it's very handy to be using AI for your own needs, but it's not necessarily going to deliver value to the organization, which will become a topic when tokens become chargeable and things aren't just for free. And now your salary plus your token cost and the cost of using AI, you'd better make sure that you're building systems that are designed for an entire organization to benefit from how you use AI. And so I imagine that standing back, and Brooke, as you've said, designing the system and having a strategic mindset around how we're using AI and when you can apply the centaur. What is the ordering, Allison, again, for us? The centaur, self-automator, cyborg.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing.
Nailed it.
This limited series is brought to you by Strela, the AI-powered customer research platform. We're taking a short pause to hear from Strela's co-founder, Priya Krishnan, and her perspective on this conversation.
Hi, I'm Priya Krishnan, one of the founders of Strela, and we are an end-to-end AI customer research platform. We use AI to help you come up with the right questions to ask, then run voice-based AI-moderated interviews and synthesize the results instantly. You can think of us as this trusted research partner that takes you from question to insight, developing, running, and analyzing real customer interviews in just a few days rather than weeks. Allison gave some of the most useful vocabulary I've heard for a phrase that we all throw around and almost never define, and that's human in the loop. She points out that when you actually pick at it, there's not that much underneath, so she breaks it down into 3 different modes from a Harvard study of how consultants actually work. The self-automator hands the task to the AI and then checks the output when it's done. The centaur holds the strategy and the judgment and passes clearly bounded pieces to the AI. And finally, the cyborg works in constant back and forth, using it as a thought partner, asking it to poke holes and surfacing counter arguments. And her real insight, it's not these 3 labels. It's that they're not personality types. A skilled person ping-pongs between all 3 inside a single project, reading the context, how high the stakes are, how much judgment the step needs, and whether the model is even good at this particular task. And then she said the part that stuck with me the most. Almost all of the tooling out there is only built for one mode, the self-automator. Hand it off, get it back, check it. Which means the most interesting ways of working with AI are the ones that our tools support the least. And that reminded me of how we think about Strela. The lazy version of an AI research tool is pure self-automator. Push a button, get a report back, and hope that it's right. But we deliberately don't build only for that. The researcher stays in Centaur mode over the discussion guide and the strategy, and in Cyborg mode in the synthesis, going back and forth, interrogating what came back, and not just accepting it.
Thanks, Priya. Find out more about Strela at strela.io. Back to the episode. Okay, so I want to recap because we've been from the management theme and the messy middle that Brooke, you spoke about in terms of the executive requiring that everybody uses AI, and then Allison from the IC point of view. Some people are diving in all hands and feet as you have, and others are a bit more tentative and unsure. And Brooke, you've created the space hopefully for as many people as possible to feel safe to dive in and start to experiment and make things happen and get on board with it all. But there is this tension between those two phases. And Allison, you've spoken about, on the one hand, it's give everything over, but on the other hand, don't. And so there's these tensions between the many much more sophisticated than I've expressed sides you've spoken about. And the plumb line in that is step back, acknowledge that there are these three ways of engaging with AI, and design those in and be aware of them. Is that a good enough summary of kind of what we've covered in the messy middle?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the only thing I would add is when we're thinking about from a team's perspective, when I talk to my peers and I look at some of the orgs that they're in, a lot of processes and tooling in those teams is geared very much towards the self-automator. And so I would say that, it's important to be aware of these mindsets and to be conscious and intentional when you're using AI, but it's also going to be really important that ICs are supported by processes and tooling that give them the skills to identify what situations are more appropriate for specific modes of being human in the loop, but then also that they have access to tooling that lets them do that and processes that help them move fluidly between those things.
Brooke, is that something that you are working on as a manager that's like the new to-do on your list that you didn't expect having 2 years ago?
There's been many new to-dos on my list that I did not expect a couple years ago. Yeah, I mean, the way I'm thinking a bit about this is we have these different modes of human in the loop or interacting with AI, and when are they appropriate? Like, there's some contextual factors that come into our work as user researchers, and some of the key ones are stakes. Like, how high stakes is this project? How low stakes? And that kind of determine how involved the human should be and what your comfort level is in automating parts of it versus having, that cyborg in control. Another is, aside from stake and risk, is like just the level of urgency, right? So if somebody needs something, there's a high level of urgency, we need to rely more on automation in order to meet a tight deadline. So balancing some of these different contextual factors around like risk, urgency, tools, what's the right combination, what level of human verification can I even do with some of these tools, because that can vary depending on how you're using the AI and how you kind of can get into that like black box of what's happening.
Yeah, the black box has been such a big theme. We're almost out of time. We've got a few more minutes left. So I wanted to offer an opportunity in your experience for each of you from a manager and an IC point of view. If someone is kind of sitting on the edges of AI right now, kind of thinking, oh, how do I leap in? What is your advice as to the first thing that they do? From Brooke, we'll start with you with the manager perspective. A manager's listening in. What is the first step that they should take as they kind of lead their team into a world in which they're augmenting the research with AI?
Yeah. Get in there and play and experiment yourself. I think that's going to create more empathy for the folks on your team who are doing that, more understanding, and just like more understanding of what's possible with it. So you know where it can be applied. So, dedicate time to playing around and seeing what's possible with AI. Get familiar with the tools. Don't just offload that to folks on the team and expect them to get up to speed.
I love that. It just reminds me of your point of like, you can be wrong as well. I think it just takes that step down, step back and going, yeah, I'm figuring it out too. And you don't have to be the boss and kind of know everything. Allison, from the IC perspective, what is your advice to an IC who's kind of hanging on the edges, maybe has a really supportive manager, maybe doesn't? What is your advice?
Yeah, I think what I would tell them first, I would probably just validate like that it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel uncertain because I think that so much of what ICs are seeing in professional platforms is just everyone saying that they figured it out and comment for the playbook that's going to let them do the same thing. And I think I would just be like, no one has it figured out right now. Everyone, if we look at like the change curve, like we are still so early into this. So everyone's figuring things out right now. And so what I would encourage them to do is to continue to use the skills that make all researchers effective, which is like that curiosity and to stay curious and to hold space for the possibility that maybe this is something that could be really amazing. But the only way to find out is to try and to think about the things about their jobs that either they want to do more of or they want to do less of, like just basic task crafting, and figure out how to use AI in a way that is going to let them be ultimately more satisfied with their day to day. I don't think that researchers by any means need to be AI babysitters. And I think particularly if they expand their perspective beyond just that self-automator way of being human in the loop, it's really exciting to have a thought partner that never gets sick of seeing you darken their doorstep, is never annoyed with you if you ask the same question 3 times or asks, hey, can you explain that to me in a different way? For me, this has been an instrument that has allowed me to get more curious. And so my advice to them would be to start small, not worry about getting it right or having the biggest impact off the get-go, and just not ever being satisfied that like they've figured it all out because this technology is changing at such a rapid rate that what they're doing this month is likely going to look very different than what they're doing at this time next year.
I love this because it comes right back to the theme of what I'm hearing from both of you is kind of get comfortable with the messy middle. It's messy. It's not tidy. Be humble, be curious, learn. And at some point, maybe we'll either get used to the messy middle and be quite content hanging out in the messiness, or we'll figure it out and life will become more tidy, more known again. And we can all kind of pick up and carry on as if as if nothing happened. It's been a joy to have you both on the series, on this episode. If people want to reach out to you, should they reach out on LinkedIn? Where should they reach out?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great.
LinkedIn is great.
Amazing. I will share your LinkedIn handles in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Kate. It was a really enjoyable conversation. Thanks for creating the space.
Yeah, this was so nice to be able to nerd out about this with folks. It's been a treat.
I could nerd out for hours with the two of you. Thanks for listening to How to AI UXR. This series was produced by the Research Ops Review and sponsored by Strella, the AI-powered customer research platform. Find the How to AI UXR map in the show notes. The map details how research professionals worldwide are augmenting UXR at the crawl, walk, and run levels of complexity.